Okay. Do you want to know what day it is today? Why it's The Mask's 30th anniversary. So, for those who don't know what the movie is, of course, stars Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz, and it was one of three films that had Jim Carrey in it back in 1994. So, without further ado, here are 30 facts you may not have known about the mask. So, let's get into it. Okay, I have notes. I'm gonna read them for you. So let's get into it. Okay, the first one is the movie is actually based on a comic by Dark Horse, um, which was created by I think Mike Webb. I think his name was, and it's nowhere as gruesome as the film version. Bear in mind. The second one is, and this is an interesting one. The movie score was actually set in Dublin in Windmill Studios up in Dublin by Randy Elderman, who also done the likes of 27 Dresses, While You're Sleeping, Leap Year, the list goes on and on. So, yeah. Number three, Cameron Diaz auditioned not once, not twice, but 12 times for the role of Tina Carlisle before she finally got it, as this is her movie debut, and she, of course, was a model back then, and the directors were looking for a girl that, would fit the bill, and they, of course, saw something in Cameron Diaz, and the rest was history. Yeah, the yellow suit that Jim Carrey actually wears as the mask was actually based off a suit that he wore during stand up in the early 80s, I believe. So, yeah, that's a fun one. Number five, Jim Carrey based Stanley on his father's friend, Mike, I think his name was. So, yeah, that was nice of him. And number six, the oversized tees that Jim Carrey wears were supposed to be for silent scenes only, but he decided to persevere with them, and he was able to talk with them. So yeah, fair, fair fucks from. Seven is most of the lines were ad libbed. Like there was a lot of lines like from the likes of The Fugitive or Old Yeller or Gone with the Wind. The list goes on. Yeah, he was an ad libber as well back in the 90s. The makeup actually took 4 hours to apply because it didn't use much prosthetics at all, and Jim Carrey only light latex, I believe, and then they'd give him a ball cap and like painted the thing green and everything, and the rest was history. So yeah, because he has a very animated face in real life. So yeah. I said Greg Canham. Yeah, so Greg Canham. Speaking of Greg Canham, he also did makeup for Mrs. Doubtfire, Big Mama's House, White Chicks, The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. I think he did makeup for. No, I didn't do makeup for The Grinch. No. So anyway. A sequel. Yeah, there was a sequel back in 2005, but before all that, there was this thing that Nintendo did where if they won the competition for Nintendo for The Mask 2, then that person actually go on and star as a cameo in that film. But sadly, it wasn't meant to be, and we got the god awful film Son the Mask, which should have never been made because it had no Jim Carrey in it, no Cameron Diaz, no Peter Green. No one came back, only Ben Stein. So yeah, it was terrible. Cameron Diaz sings in this movie. Well, sort of. She was actually dubbed by Susan Boyd, who I think done the voice for what you call Jessica Rabbit in Who Framed Roger Rabbit. So yeah. This film, like I said, was one of three Jim Carrey films in 1994. He done the likes of Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber, and The Mask was in between Ace Ventura and Dumb and Dumber. So yeah, the man was one busy fella in 1924. Jim Carrey's idea of the whole smoking the heart thing when he was smoking a pipe when he met Cameron Diaz in the park was ad libbed. So yeah. Anne Fletcher, of course, is a cinematographer and director. She was the director of 27 Dresses, Hocus Pocus 2, The Proposal. She actually made a cameo as one of the dancing cops in the Chicka Chicka Boom Boom, set on Cuban Pete song. So yeah. Jim Carrey was paid $450,000 for his role in this film. That is a lot of money. Most of the film was based on Looney Tunes. Like you see the likes of Tasmanian Devil, you see like Bugs Bunny somewhere, and Porky the Pig and all that. So naturally enough, because it's from Warner Brothers and the Looney Tunes is based off Warner Brothers. So yeah. Jim Carrey was 31 years old when the film came out, and Cameron Diaz was 21, and she actually celebrated her birthday during filming back in 1993 when it was filming in 1993. The line "You love me, you really, really love me" was a spoof of a speech by Sally Field for some film that she won an Oscar for back in the 80s. So yeah. The nightclub scene, Coco Bongo, was actually named after a nightclub that was also in the Majestic, which also had Jim Carrey in it. And speaking of Jim Carrey, he was actually the owner of Coco Bongo in Mexico, the nightclub in Mexico. So yeah, it's a fun fact. The film was nominated for Best Visuals, but lost out to Forrest Gump in 1995 because the film came out in 1994, and Oscars were out in 1995 for all the films coming in 1994, so yeah. Doran Tyrell wasn't in the comics at all, because in the comics it was the Mask himself that was a villain and not the hero, because whenever someone would wear the mask in the comic books, they would turn into a serial killer and they would literally go on a killing spree. Think of it as Deadpool wearing a green mask, and there you go, problem solved. The garage scene where Stanley was getting his car fixed was actually the same warehouse that was in Ghostbusters in the 80s, so yeah. This is the only comedy that Chuck Russell did, because he also directed another movie in 1994 as well, Nightmare on Elm Street 3, Dream Quest or something. So yeah, and he was also director of The Scorpion King, which had Dwayne Johnson, and yeah, that CGI was god awful. Tina Carlisle was actually created for the film, because in the comic book version she was actually a girl called Kathy who was Stanley's girlfriend, and she would put on the mask as well and go on a killing spree as well. So yeah, if you read the comics of The Mask, like I never read the comics of The Mask, but if you read the comics of The Mask, or whoever owns the comic book version of The Mask, and let me tell you, it was gruesome. So yeah. This film was actually, this film was actually supposed to be a horror film, but since Jim Carrey got the role, it got turned into a dark black comedy instead. So yeah, can you imagine Jim Carrey playing a serial killer, wearing the green mask, and going on a killing spree and killing Doran Tyrell and the whole lot? And I'm like, by God, this is Deadpool in the 90s. And it was, you might as well say, Deadpool in the 90s, because he would throw a fourth wall joke. It must be a Canadian thing, since Jim Carrey and Ryan Reynolds are Canadians. Beats me. Anyway, moving on. So the likes of Jenny McCarthy, who was a great Jim Carrey, by the way, in the early noughties, Vanessa Angel, Alicia Silverstone, as Af, Gwyneth Paltrow, Vanessa Williams, who actually sung a song "You Will Be My Baby" in the end credits of this film, and Winona Ryder, all auditioned for Tina Carlisle, as well as Anna Nicole Smith, but of course the studio was like, no, it has to be Cameron Diaz, and the rest was history. Matthew Broderick, Keanu Reeves, Steve Martin, Rick Moranis, I think Kevin Kline was another one. They all auditioned too for Stanley Ipkiss before Jim Carrey took on the role. And I guess the reason why Jim Carrey took on the role is because this movie is heavily based on cartoons, and Jim Carrey is actually a massive fan of cartoons in real life. So yeah, that's another extra bonus one for you. Warren Beatty, Richard Gere, Tim Allen and Pierce Brosnan were all considered for the role of Lieutenant Mitch Kellaway before it was given to Peter Riegert, who was in We Bought a Zoo. So yeah. Jack Nicholson, Robert De Niro, Rupert Everett and Dennis Hopper were all considered for the role of Doran Tyrell before Peter Green got the role. And I never saw Peter Green in the movie after this until The Bounty Hunter with Gerard Butler and Jennifer Aniston. So yeah. And finally, there was a rumour that there was going to be a gender-bended version of The Mask, but we never got any word on it yet. Will we ever see a Mask sequel, a proper one? God only knows. So yeah. But yeah, there are the facts that I have found on The Mask. If there's any more facts that I didn't actually cover, please let me know down in the comments down below. And yeah, what was your favourite moment in The Mask? For me, there was so many of them. My favourite scene is probably the Hey Pachuco scene with Jim Carrey and Cameron Diaz dancing to that song. Along with the big number, the Cuban Pete number, which was hilarious. But yeah, the whole movie itself is really, really funny. It's got really good visuals, great acting. It's got a nice story as well about being yourself and not pretending to be something you're not. And another bonus one, now it's in my head, another bonus one is that the costume designer who done the costumes for this was also over Nutty Professor in 1996. So yeah. Anyway, happy anniversary to The Mask, and that's it.